And so what I loved about rugged love was this understanding that God may have me stay in hard places and do hard things. But if I'm doing it from that place of his unconditional love and that I'm letting his love flow through me, that I can have the strength to do it even if it's hard.
Welcome into Lessons from Living. I am your host, Beth Graham. How do you maintain hope in the midst of ongoing addiction? How do you set appropriate boundaries? And what are some spiritual practices to protect and restore your home and your family? We're getting into it deep today in this final installment with Dawn Ward. Let's listen in. You introduced the concept of ambiguous loss, where a child is physically present but relationally gone. How can a mother begin to grieve a child? They're still alive, you know? You're grieving that, I guess, the relationship that is not there. I'm sure this can happen in lots of different situations, not just addiction. You know, you could have a problem with a lifestyle choice and have a child distance you, and there could even be estrangement there. How do you begin to grieve that relationship and still maintain hope for the future?
That's a process that when I wrote about it, I didn't recognize even how much more that intense that could become. And so there's things that, for example, say that I wanted to, I'm going to use an example. Like I want to buy my daughter a dress. I just see a dress. I think it's pretty. I want to buy it for her. And I do. Or I see something, for my child and my son, I want to buy it for him and I just give it to him. But I have to be careful with that with this son, because beyond the addiction itself, what starts to happen that as you pull back layers is often their mindsets become entitled. And and what will happen is they will start to think, well, you'll hear things out of their mouths, and it's almost like because if parents rescue and enable for too long, it starts to be something that they're actually resentful towards, but then they need it. So they love you, they hate you, they love you, they hate you. They're resentful because they want to do it on their own. They know they should be doing it on their own, but mom and dad keep stepping in, but I need your help. And so what happens is a small gesture that you could do in a situation where that mindset isn't there at all could actually be a trigger and could trigger a mindset in them that could then start to be, hey, mom, can I borrow $10? Hey, mom, I need a phone bill paid. Hey, mom, I need, gas for my car. And so it's a process of the grief comes when you have to step back to the point where you're not looking to punish them, you're not looking to hurt them, but you're starting to look at what part am I playing in it? You didn't cause it. You can't control it. You can't cure it, but you may play a part in being a stumbling block, or you may be doing something that you don't even recognize, that when you say that thing or you do that thing, that it could be a trigger to them. So what might be completely normal and healthy in another relationship might not be normal and healthy in this relationship, especially if it's in that early stages where they're just getting their life back together. You don't want to be that, that catalyst that could cause that thinking to cause them to spiral back down. And that sounds like a lot of pressure. It sounds like you're being hypervigilant, but that's not it. It really is a process of when the Lord is saying, lay them down, that we're not constantly picking little things back up to make ourselves feel better or to make ourselves feel normal. And that, I think, for me was the biggest grief, was that their normalcy was gone. And so, yes, while I had the possibility that I could get that phone call, and that was a heavy and a hard one, that actually wasn't my biggest area of struggle, because the Lord worked with me very early on that and transformed my mindset that, Dawn, you could get that call at any time about anybody you love. It could be a car accident. It could be threatening disease. It could be anything at all that could be that message that you've lost that person you love. So I had to shrink addiction down especially the demonic forces and all the evil and the stronghold and everything that's behind it, the forces that are at work to really try to kill off this generation and everything. Satan really uses addiction to destroy families and all of that. But the Lord had to say to me, this isn't any bigger to me than any other obstacle or any other loss that you might face. It's big to you, Dawn, but it's not any bigger to me. It's not unmanageable. I still have this under control. And no matter what happens, no matter what lies the enemy tells you, no one leaves this earth and comes to me and passes and dies and comes to me. No one does that except that I say today's their last day. And I had to trust in that sovereignty of God, that while the enemy is just creating hell on earth, which he really is, and there's so much out there that we could be afraid of, I had to come to that place of peace of knowing that Jesus loves my children more than I do. And he is looking out for them. And should that day come when they perhaps die in some sort of a death that isn't what we want, or an early death, I had to say, Lord, I trust you. I trust you with the days of their life and the number of their days. So the grief itself was definitely more centered around the loss of normalcy and things that my son wants for himself that he hasn't gotten yet. Like, I don't have grandchildren. My middle son doesn't want children. Him and his wife have come to that conclusion. They've been married 13 years and they just don't want them. I'm praying the Lord changes their mind, but so far, no. But he does want a family. And that's something that hasn't happened for him because, he is in a relationship right now, but those have been so destroyed by addiction and everything as well. And so it's really set him back. He also hasn't been able, he works for the union, but he hasn't had that consistent long-term career that most men at this age would want to have so they could have a home and buy their house and do those things. And I frankly don't know if with some of the mental health struggles that he has, even if addiction wasn't part of it, if just that would be an ongoing struggle for him or not. So that's the grief, the grief of looking forward. A few months ago, the Lord did speak to me. This was before my son's last breakdown. So I would say it was probably around December, January. And the Lord said, your son's going to be 40. And he said, this is his life without a miracle. And that miracle first really hit me like that when he said that. And then the Lord said, but everyone is a miracle. Everyone that I save out of, their sin, everyone that I save out of their self-destruction, that we would all, who knows what our lives would be like without Jesus. Yeah. And so he gave me that hope. And so that's the hope that I hold on to, is that I've done what I can do. I can continue to pray for him. I can continue to love him. I this morning texted him and just reminded him I love him and I care for him. And we ended up having a nice short little conversation because he was at work. But also we don't grieve without hope. We can grieve differently than the world because our hope is in the Lord and he can change everything on a dime. And so that has given me a lot of peace, and also learning to look for those small blessings. Like the conversation this morning, that brought me joy. And because sometimes I'm like, Lord, I want to be careful. I don't want to go into mom mode. I want to be careful that if you want me to talk to him, that it be a normal, healthy conversation. Because maybe I would say something that would just be like, there's my mother's disappointment again. There's my mom's fear again.
Yeah.
But I want you to know that because this has gone on for so long, he's gone through a lot of counseling, a lot of Christian counseling. He sees the struggles I've had. Like, he never used to like to go to like a Celebrate Recovery meeting, and he'd say like, we're drug addicts, and there's people getting up there going, I'm a codependent. And he would almost mock the people that way because he thought we could die any day and they're a codependent. But now over the years, he's seen the destruction that, what the world would call codependency is, the Bible doesn't use that term, what I was talking to you about, that if my child's not healthy and happy, that I can't be healthy and happy, and what damage that can do to us.
Well, Dawn, you mentioned the darker forces that are part of addiction. I like that you get into that in the book. And I know you navigate it's a controversial, really, debate of whether addiction is a brain disease or moral failure. Tell us about your position there and why you feel that what you do.
So I have seen both extremes. And it's almost like which comes first, the chicken or the egg, and I think that's it was very difficult for me in the beginning to hear the word disease and know that when my child would go to a meeting, he would have to say, I'm an addict, and that they would have to say, once an addict, always an addict, that they would have to say that this is a condition that I will have for the rest of my life. And the only hope I have is to manage it by, coming to meetings and making choices that don't involve drugs and alcohol. And it just seemed to be such a bondage, like exchanging one bondage for another.
Yeah.
And that was what I wrestled with as I would go to the meetings for the parents and everything. But as a Christian, how do I have hope in the Lord? How, if the Lord is a God of miracles and he can set people free from cancer and he can set people free from anything, how is it that this is the thing that we have to keep in our mind settled, that this is a disease that is incurable? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. It just spiraled me into a deep depression of not knowing how to accept it and be supportive, but at the same time, not lose hope. And so that was where I started to look into the science and what does the science say about it, and how much of this really is science? What is the science really saying out there? Because some of this seems like science has changed, and that this understanding of what disease is, especially back in the day, was more that it was something you were born with. And so while you could see genetic tendencies, predispositions, there really wasn't any way to narrow down pathology and blood tests and lab tests and say, yes, this person was born with this, and one drink of alcohol or one touch of this substance was going to send them into this spiral of this declining disease. And so that was really kind of, I think that went back with old AA back in the 50s and all of that. Now, over the years, science has even shifted the conversation now. They're really looking more at neural pathways. They're looking at how the brain handles signals, how it handles messages, how it handles repetitive behavior, and that learned behaviors can be changed based on rewiring of the brain because of neuroplasticity. So that really does fall in line a lot with the scriptures, because the Bible tells us to not be transformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing of our mind. So Jesus, even back then, was already, the Bible was already preparing us that we can actually change how we think and change how we behave based on the Word of God. And I think that science is starting to now come along, and we're seeing more books out there that are really talking about addiction from a different perspective that way. Now, the disease part of it is absolutely that when somebody continues to abuse their body physically and they continue to put alcohol and drugs and substances into their body, they are causing physical harm. And they are increasing their tolerance, increasing dependency. So for me, it was this balance of looking at the person holistically. And instead of saying, oh, you have this disease and this is it, and you're never going to be able to change it, and you're just going to have to accept it and go to your meetings and say, I'm an addict. I think that new way of saying that I'm an overcomer through Christ Jesus, and really seeing themselves as being able to live free from drugs and alcohol, is very good and very healthy for them. But remember, I'm the parent, and they have to come to these conclusions themselves. If you're somebody struggling with alcohol and drugs, it's necessary, especially if you're a believer, to go through the scriptures, to see what the Lord says about this, to see how he speaks to you, because there's various different ways to get help. And, it's up to that person to find out what helps them and what hurts them. My younger son does not want to go to those meetings. Those really caused him to spiral. He did not do well with saying that all the time. He needed to see himself as somebody who could live free from them and be successful and put his energy and everything into who God was calling him to be. That was very important to him. But a lot of people find good support in the 12 steps. And it'd be like going to a cancer doctor. And some people are going to choose to go a non-traditional way of approaching their cancer. They may decide that I'm going to do the natural approach and I don't want chemo and I don't want radiation. Somebody else may do a blend, and somebody else may say, I just want to put my trust in the medical system. They've researched this and I'm going to go this way. And I think it's the same way when it comes to addiction. And so personally, the Bible does not teach anywhere in it that addiction is a disease. It does teach that gluttony, drunkardness, those type of things fall into the sin category. But remember, we serve a God of grace who also understands that we sin for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes it's not intentional that this has happened to us. Sometimes it just is that life has, put us in a position where we've made some choices that we've landed here. And so that's where God's grace comes in. And it's very hard to say that that's where my stand is without sounding judgmental. But I've been able to even do that in my conversation with my son. It's always, what's the Lord showing you? And generally he'll say, the Lord showed me that I didn't trust him and that I rebelled against him and that he wants me to ask him for forgiveness. So while he's still getting medical help, he's also working on his relationship with the Lord and learning how to trust him and depend on him in it. So that was something that I had to work through. And I actually spent many, many years researching that before I started to write it.
And I know earlier you mentioned Al-Anon's declaration, I didn't cause it, I can't control it, I can't cure it, the 3 C's. This is similar. As a Christian, how did you reconcile this very secular recovery principles with your belief in a God that can do anything, that can do the impossible?
There's not a lot of things that I hold on to because I didn't attend a lot of 12-step meetings, but I've been in the communities. I've been in secular communities as well as faith-based communities and also communities that are blended. And I would hear that. And it helped me because I had to first get past that first step of I didn't cause it. Because initially I believed that if I hadn't been asleep at the wheel, if I had been paying attention as a mom, if I had seen those first warning signs, maybe if I hadn't controlled them so much, or if I had been more in control, like the whole thing, the whole gambit, I had to come to that at first. And, my boys, both having conversations with them, have always said, Mom, you were the best mom ever. And look at the trouble we gave you. And so I've never had them ever tell me in any way that I caused it. And so that one was something that I had to wrestle with because it was all my own stuff. It was my own beliefs, my own, if I'd mommed better. And so that the cause one. And then, of course, the control one was one I wrestled with for the longest period of time because I was a control freak. So I was trying to control everything from just, so many moms will say, well, I don't want my child on the street using drugs because they might pass away. But then they would have them in the home and the kid would be using drugs and the mom's having to stand over that child with a Narcan, bottle because they might die in their home. And so this hypervigilance of control based on fear was another one that I think the secular community is wise to share that message because we really start to realize that the more this goes on, the longer this goes on, how powerless we are. And of course, I can't cure it. That is 100% in their court. 100%. And it's not 1%, because if I had 1%, I'd stretch that 1% to 99. Yeah, but to recognize that, I might blow it miserably today, or I might do everything right, but it's not my battle. It's his battle. And as a parent, all I can say is, as I process this, especially over the last year, even since the book came out, is I feel like I can breathe a sigh of relief now. I feel like I can finally breathe. Like the world has become bigger again for me. And that I have more air capacity in my lungs. I feel like I was surviving off of, the tiny little corner of one lung is all I was breathing. And that I was just suffocating and just like a little goldfish, just trying to just get little puffs of air in that was taking its last few breaths. And that's what I was operating under for so many years. And as I'm practicing and learning those things and keeping that in mind and just constantly turning it back over to Jesus, it's like I'm learning how to run a marathon. My lungs are holding more air and I have more space around my faith now
Yeah.
to not be in such rigid safety zone. It's a wise way to remember it, to kind of remember it, but looking at those from a faith-based perspective.
Yeah. Does it reconcile in your mind those three things and the fact that God can do the impossible? I mean, to me, it kind of seems like it's at odds, isn't it?
Well, one thing I would confess now that I've had to sit in for a while is yes, because that space now is where I have often wrestled with hopelessness. And when I was doing something and I was busier fighting and actively involved in it and empowering my faith and saying the scriptures the right way and praying certain prayers and constantly activating my faith, I felt that I had more hope. And because I was doing something.
Yes.
So even though it looked like I wasn't controlling it because I'm praying and giving it to the Lord, or it looks like I didn't cause it because I'm recognizing, hey, this isn't mine to carry, but I'm still praying for my son. I'm still interceding for my son. I'm still battling in the spiritual realm for my son. Resting in the Lord means sometimes you get all the stuff out of your head and you just sit in his presence and you don't try to pray it a certain way where you feel like you're manipulating him or that's your intention. You can't manipulate the Lord. But my point is that intention of if I just name it and claim it this way, or if I just say this prayer this certain amount of times a day, or if I feel this, if I recite and memorize these scriptures, all of that, I've been a Christian for so many years. That is what sustains me. That's the bread of life, is God's word in me, the living water of Jesus Christ in me. But when you sit in a space of honestly like doing nothing, sometimes it can feel hopeless. It can feel like you've given up. And that's the process the Lord's taking me through of growing my faith when there's times when he's like, Dawn, I just want you to rest right now. And the faith part is in the resting, not in the doing. Or I just want you to trust right now. Just sit and trust and empty yourself of being busy reciting scriptures, being busy praying, doing all that. I just want you to sit in my presence. And that looks like climbing up into his lap and like a sleeping child. And if you've ever had that child that's passed out in your lap and you could pick them up and you could sling them over your shoulder, you could do whatever you want with them, but they are out cold. And I believe that there's times in this battle that the Lord just wants us to be out cold in his arms and just know that we're protected and that we're being held. But that doesn't often feel like faith. That doesn't often feel like hope. And that's the part of the journey that he has me in now.
That makes sense. Back to the dark forces, you share a chilling experience about a sinister presence in your home during a time when both your son and your husband were struggling. How do you think a mother should respond when she realizes that her family's battle is not just against flesh and blood?
I've always believed and understood as best as my brain can that there is a spiritual battle going on against the forces of good and evil, and that the enemy from day one has done nothing but want to separate us from God. He wants our worship. He wants our attention. He doesn't want us worshiping God. He doesn't want us trusting in him. And so he's notorious for distractions and worries and the cares of the world and those type of things that we just kind of just sit with and live with and just let go unchecked in our mind because, we read something in the newspaper today or saw something on social media or had a conversation with our loved one, and now it's just playing over in our head. And we're not really pursuing that in the spiritual realm, in spiritual battle. And so for me, what happened was in that particular situation was an awareness that when my husband and my son, because I do reveal in the book that my husband also had a struggle with pain pill addiction and gambling. And so this was a point when he was out of the house because I said, you've got to get this figured out. And so now the only two people in the home are myself and my daughter. And I'm starting to deal with the awareness that there is something going on here and that there is a presence in the house, this sense of darkness, and where things should feel like, I can breathe a sigh of relief. I've got a few days off from all of this and they're getting help. And instead, I was recognizing that the enemy was not taking a break, and that the things that he was even saying and speaking were like, this is, your days are numbered. Like, this is it. I have control over this. And this is never going to be anything that you're going to beat. And he was just really in my head. But I was feeling that physical presence, and I'm feeling that suffocating presence, even waking up with the sense that there was something in the room with me, and just feeling that, to the point where you think, is somebody in the room? Has somebody come into the room that's shouldn't be in my house?
Yeah.
And then as we started to see a few things in the house, and my daughter started to mention it too, and sleeping in another room. And that was really when we recognized that we were under spiritual attack. And I think it's important at that point that you ask the Lord to show you what's going on. And in our case, that, these things can come in through drugs. They can come in through movies that are being watched. They can come in through somebody's watching pornography. There's just so many different ways that the enemy can get into your home and into the environment of the home. And in our case, her and I really went through the house and prayed, anointed the house with oil, and just really asked the Lord to just take possession of every room, to get rid of anything that in the house that didn't belong there, in the name of Jesus. And we just really relied on him. And a few times we went through and prayed through the entire house, especially my son's room and my husband, where my husband had been, just all the things. And we felt such a peace come over us as the Lord really started to kind of move that out, and, just really his Holy Spirit presence take over the home.
That's very powerful. Have you heard of staking?
You know, I have heard of it. I personally haven't ever looked too much into it or anything, but
I was just curious. I
yeah.
don't remember the name of the guy who I heard in reference to this, but he is pretty well known for going into even communities where they are experiencing high crime rates and just a lot of darkness. And he'll stake off. He
Yes,
writes
that's
Bible
right.
verses on
Yes.
the stakes,
Yes.
puts them on the corners of
Mhm.
the community, walks the perimeter
Yes.
praying. And it's pretty crazy how things have turned around in situations like that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It really is. And we did that too. We were writing scriptures on the different cards and putting them in our rooms and different rooms of the house. And it was really amazing to see how we started sleeping peacefully again, and just really
Yeah,
sensing God's presence in the home.
that is very
And
powerful.
also another thing, just a caveat for us, is that I live in
Yeah.
Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, I've had people, that are Christians, strong believers from other places, come into Vegas and sense an oppression and sense a darkness because of just the nature of what goes on in our community, and, sex trafficking and just drugs and everything. And they glamorize it here. So it's kind of a modern Babel. Yeah, and I understand that, or Sodom and Gomorrah, but I do understand that every city has their thing, and that there's different principalities and things going that are in different areas and different regions. But in particular in Las Vegas, I think it's something that if we're not careful, we can become kind of numb to. And so really just being constantly aware of the Holy Spirit, and just being discerning if he asks us to pray about something, and to really pray for our families, and to do that spiritual warfare, and to trust that the Lord is appointing us at that time and that season to do that.
Yes. Well, as far as moving forward and kind of having a practical application, you offer a very practical tool for communication based on traffic lights. Can you just tell us about that briefly?
Yes. And that was something I learned a long time ago. Actually, a lady at our church, I would say probably 30, 35 years ago, talked about the red light, green light, and yellow light conversations. And it was something that I didn't really think I held on to or that stuck with me, but I found that it did. And when it comes to conversations with our addicted loved ones, our addicted children, even in healthy relationships, when we look at conversations, if we can look at them as green light would be a conversation that can be anything that's safe. So you might be
Mm-hmm.
talking about food or talking about weather or maybe your favorite sports team or what you're going to do this summer. Those kind of conversations are fun. But I think we all know what it's like when we're at a family gathering or a party and somebody throws that one comment in, and all of a sudden now the conversation becomes a yellow light because now you know this conversation could become volatile at any moment,
Okay.
right? Or it could possibly you could shift it. You could say the right thing and it could become green light again. Okay, so and practically speaking might be politics, religion. Those can be kind of a yellow light conversation. In my medical practice that I worked for, our doctors put that in a red light conversation, but they didn't want us to have conversations with our patients and things that involve politics, religion,
Mm.
because they realized that people were very heated and very opinionated. So there are conversations when you're dealing with somebody, then you have a relationship with somebody who struggles with drugs. And generally, if that person is under the influence at that particular moment, that's not the time that you start yelling at them about their drug use and how they need to clean up their act and all of that. That's not the time. That would
Gotcha.
be a red light conversation. A green light conversation might be hard to have even because they might be not in any condition to talk. So if they're not even in any condition to talk, you consider that red light and you just, in other words, you might normally be able to talk to them about the weather, but not when they're in this condition. So you just choose to have the conversation at another time. And then the yellow light is, and also before I get into the yellow light, the red light is things like name calling and
Mm-hmm.
demeaning somebody and acting like they're stupid. That's not going to be good in any
Yeah.
relationship. So the yellow light is just when you start to see that, hey, I could have this conversation with somebody else, but I've got to be real careful having that with my addicted loved one. And so it doesn't mean that you just always stay in green and safe, but it means that you practice timing. So if
Mm-hmm.
you see that, hey, this conversation isn't going the way I thought it should, I'm going to shift it rather than let it escalate into red. So it
Yes.
really it really revolves around what the person's condition is, how receptive they are, and then if certain things that you say are going to push their buttons, you need to learn how to just hold that back a little bit.
Okay. You define rugged love as love with teeth. Tell us about that.
So that was one of the first books that I read when I was first going through this, and it came from a book. There's a pastor named Dave Harvey and another pastor, I'm forgetting his name right now, but the book is called Letting Go, and it's Rugged
Mm-hmm.
Love for Wayward Souls. And three of my favorite books that I've read on this, on the subject of even parenting prodigals and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
or drugs and addiction, have been written by men. And I found that I've really done well with their perspective. They're kind of more analytical and just very matter of fact. And so I liked that when I was reading through this, they were Pastor Dave and the other author were challenging us that when it gets hard, that doesn't mean you don't love. That's actually when you're loving like Christ loves. It's a love that's willing to take action. It's a love that's willing to do the right thing, even if it hurts. It's a love that's sacrificial. So this love with teeth, where in the drug community, especially way back, maybe 40, 50 years ago, tough love was a term that went around. And it was parents basically throwing their kids on the street and saying, get your act together. I don't really want to see you until you have your act together, versus embracing them and trying to help them through their addiction. And so, what I loved about rugged love was this understanding that God may have me stay in hard places and do hard things. But if I'm doing it from that place of His unconditional love, and that I'm letting His love flow through me, that I can have the strength to do it even if it's hard. And so that particular book, actually, my husband finally just read it. And I think it meant a lot to him, but not as much as it meant to me to read it 15 years ago and to carry those truths with me through all
Mm-hmm.
these years.
Interesting. I know we talk a lot about labels that people take on, and you mention man made labels like addict's mom, and you contrast that with God's, what you say are designer labels. So tell me what the difference is.
The difference is what we accomplish, what we do, how we look is important in the world. according to the world's terms, that's what's important. So labels will be, she's pretty, she's smart, she's a great mom, she's, not a good mom, that kind of a thing. And, or, her kids are addicts. But God's designer labels look at our identity and who we are in Him. And He sees us as His beloved, as His chosen. He's not looking at our flaws. He's not looking at the places that we failed. He's looking at us through perfect love. And that helped me so much, because when I would start to put those labels on myself, the Lord would go, no, 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 you're my beloved daughter. And that's where I saw His grace really come into building up my identity as seeing myself through His eyes instead of seeing myself through my own disappointments and failures.
Okay. If you had the opportunity to offer hope to mothers out there who are in the throes of this, what would you say to them today?
First of all, I do understand, moms, that this is a journey. And a lot of what I'm talking about now may really resonate with moms who have been on this journey for a long time. It might seem a bit overwhelming to that mom who's just now starting to go through this. And please feel free to continue to talk with me. I'm not on a rigid schedule to get off or anything, because I really want to minister and speak to the hearts of these moms.
Yeah.
So I remember what it felt like when I thought this could be a long journey. And when my younger son was going through this, we didn't go to some of the meetings that they had for the parents. And I remember the doctor, the psychiatrist, who was such a kind man at the center that my son had been going to. And this was even a faith-based one. It was a secular one. It was all I knew back then. It was all we really had in our community. But he called me and he said, "Hey, Dawn, I noticed you're not coming to the parents' meetings. Why is that?" And I said, "It's because," he goes, "Oh, wait a second. I know what it is." He said, "It's that you thought your son was going to be the one who was going to get over this quickly. You thought that, you're going to be the mom who you guys are going to get in, get him help, get it done, and get out." And I started laughing and I said, "That's exactly what I thought. I didn't think I needed to be the mom who needed support. I didn't think I was going to be that mom. I thought my faith was going to be enough and that we were going to get him help and we were going to move on." And he knew that. He knew that conversation that was going on in my head. And so when I look back, I think, gosh, there were so many things that fear of being labeled, fear of having to plunge in and really take the dive into what our family was going through, was keeping me from accessing the support that I really, truly did need. And as I've been now going through this journey longer, I know I could not do it alone. And I am so grateful for the pastors, the counselors, the other Christian moms that have gone through this, who sometimes don't even realize that that one little thing they say today was the life support I needed to keep going.
Yes.
And so now looking at it, I would say push in, moms, find that not just one person, but find a community, because it's hard if you're only leaning on just your husband. Or, they can't be everything for you. But find those people that God is putting around you and be vulnerable and let them help love on you and pray. Another thing that I would say I would encourage these moms with is find a prayer team that doesn't need all the details. That will, if you ask them to pray, they will just pray. And because especially like what we went through with my son back in December and January, I almost couldn't even talk about it. Like if somebody would call me and say, "What can I pray for? What are you going through?" I couldn't put the words together. I didn't want to have to explain everything because I was so mentally and emotionally exhausted. And it was such a blessing when someone would say, "Do you need prayer?" Or if I could just pick up and text a message, say, "Could you please be praying for my son and for our family? We're really going through it right now." And know that they would just take it and run with it, and they would be interceding and they would be praying. And a few days later, they might check back and say, "Still praying? Do you still need prayer?" But they weren't asking for me to have to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. There's a time and a place for that. But boy, sometimes being able to process in your brain what is going on, it's happening so fast. The chaos is happening so quickly that you feel like the Tasmanian devil has set off a bomb in the middle of a tornado. And so moms, find those people. And generally they're going to be someone with a little bit more experience, Maybe she hasn't even gone through addiction. Maybe it's just somebody that God has put in your life that's like a grandmother or somebody who will just help carry that burden for you. Or maybe it might be somebody who's gone through something similar, but they're
Yeah.
a little bit farther along in their journey. And they can reassure you not to operate from a place of fear and to remember who your God is and to remember who is fighting this battle for you. Because he say often, you just do nothing, just be still. I'll fight the battle for you. And so those things are, that was where my energy back in the early days was going towards fixing my sons. And that was where at least the 12 steps did recognize the families need support. You just
Mm-hmm.
may not, that support may not be the right support for you. And if it's not the right support for you, maybe it's a celebrate recovery at your church. Maybe it's a prayer group, a mom's prayer group. Maybe it's just two or three women at the church that are prayer warriors that will carry this for you. But
Mm-hmm.
finding that and not being ashamed to talk about it and not being ashamed to ask for help is so important. And then for the ones who maybe been doing this a long time and you're burning out and you're almost becoming bitter and resentful and maybe angry. I get it. I've had those moments where I'm just like, Lord, the Lord has to say, Dawn, forgive. It's time. You've got to practice forgiveness. You need this for your own soul. And I might not even realize I'm holding on to it. And so if that's what's going on, if you're feeling those kind of tensions and wrestling with those kind of tensions, the Lord may be putting his finger on some things in your life and in your belief system or some things that you're holding on to, maybe even anger towards God, which a lot of us don't want to ever admit. We have no right to be angry towards God, but yet we have
Right.
these feelings of anger of like, Lord, why'd you let
Mm-hmm.
this happen to my kid? And so that's another thing that, don't let those go unchecked. Get biblical counseling, get a good pastor, a mentor, somebody that you can trust to be honest with those emotions so that you can
Mm-hmm.
receive prayer and healing. And you can actually become a better person through this whole thing. Now, me, I don't know if I'm even at the place today where I could say that if I couldn't reverse the hands of time and go back and protect my sons from this, that I wouldn't do it. Like,
Mm.
I know a lot of moms would look at me and go, what are you talking about? Well, I'm a mom. I remember a time my baby got burned on the curling iron, and I still remember his little fingers. And I had told him a couple times, don't touch the curling iron, honey, it's hot. And he did. And I still remember how bad it hurt me, that I couldn't keep his little fingers from getting burned. So we're always going to be moms.
Yes.
We're always going to have those heart tugs. And so be kind to yourself that way too, mom. And if that's something that you're really struggling with, get that support and that prayer that you need too.
Yeah. Oh, such good wisdom. Thank you so much, Dawn,
Thank
for all
you.
of your time. I appreciate it. And I just think that you obviously have been marinating in the word and just have so much good words from God Himself. So I really appreciate you sharing with us
You're
today. And I'm sure,
welcome. One of the
yeah.
scriptures that I've dedicated in my book, and my book is really around, is Hebrews 4:16, and it says, "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." And that is such a life-giving verse to me because
Mhm.
we live in a hard world. We live in a world where we suffer for various reasons. Addiction is one of many, like you were talking about.
Yes.
There's so many hard things people are going through. And the world is a challenging, difficult place to live in right now with what we see going on around us. So approach the throne of grace like boldly, like
Hmm.
never resist. Just run into your Abba's arms and let him take care of you and let him give you the help that you need, and he will do it. And that's there's something powerful in recognizing our own weaknesses and being able to
Yes.
just rest in his strength. So I pray that this
Mhm.
encourages them. I thank you for taking the time to have a lengthy interview with me where we have time to actually talk about various subjects. It's always such a blessing to me to be able to share, but I'm so grateful for the time that you took with me today.
Well, yes, I'm happy to do it. And if you want to just briefly let us know how people can get in touch with you.
Yes. So the ministry website, my website page is called The Faith to Flourish. .com, thefaithoflourish.com. Also dawnrward.com. I have an R in there because I always laugh that there's a Housewives of Cheshire in England that has dawnward.com. So you guys stick that middle initial in there, and that's why the middle initials on my book and everything. It's just because somebody else had that. So Dawn R. Ward or The Faith to Flourish. And then I'm on all the different social media platforms like Facebook. You can find my personal profile, Dawn R. Ward or The Faith to Flourish, and Instagram. And I've been on LinkedIn a lot more lately, and I really enjoy the conversations over there on LinkedIn. So you can find me over there as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Come by anytime.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Dawn, what a joy to meet you and have you share on the podcast. I look forward to next time. And today we're going to leave with the words of Victor Hugo. Even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. I love you guys. Go out and make it a super day.